Welcome to Drive the Daf, clear, structured explanation of the daily Daf in 20 minutes. You can even follow in the car.
Yoma Daf Yud is primarily Agadata, where the Gemara is primarily discussing the names of various countries, places, lands, regions, and even some people that are mentioned in the Torah, and the Gemara is trying to find the modern day equivalent of who those places and people are. The Gemara later moves into a discussion of the halachas of mezuzah as far as it pertains to the parhedron, the room in the Beis Hamikdash in which the Kohen Gadol was isolated. So the Gemara first of all is trying to prove that the Persians are descendants of Yefes, son of Noach, that the Persians come from him. So the Gemara will discuss the names that are listed as descended from Yefes. So it says that the children of Yefes are Gomer, Magog, Madai, Yavan, Tuval, Meshech, and Tiras. The Gemara wants to know who all these people are. So the Gemara says Gomer is a person who began the country called Germania, also known as Germania. Magog is Candia, a place still listed today, possibly identified with the Greek island of Crete. The Gemara then goes on to say that Madai is Midia, of course, as it's called Madai throughout the Sfarim. Now, Yavan refers to Greece, of course, but Greece is primarily the culture of Macedonia. Macedonia is a country currently north of Greece, and the Gemara refers to the entire culture and area as Macedonia. Greece is called Yavan because they are named after the Ionians. Yavan is from the word Ionia, from Ion, which are the tribe who began the Greek culture altogether. Now, further, Tuval the Gemara calls Beisunaiki, Meshach the Gemara calls Musia, and Tiras the Gemara says the Machokas between Rav Simai and the Chachamim, or perhaps between Rav Simon and the Chachamim. One of them says that the Tiras is Beis Traiki, and the other one says that Tiras is Persia. And Rav Yosef has a brayso that says the Tiras is Persia. So there you see that Persia is the descendant of Yefes, because Tiras, who's listed as a descendant of Yefes, is actually referring to Persia. Now the Gemara goes on to identify other nations mentioned in the Psukim. It says Savta, Rama, and Savtecha. Well, what are these? So Rav Yosef has a brayso that Savta and Savtecha are the inner and outer regions of a country called Sakistan. And the distance between the two of them are 100 parsa, and the circumference of the outer Sakistan is 1,000 parsa. Okay, going on further, the Gemara discusses Nimrod, and the Psukim had said that his kingdom was Bavel, Erech, Akkad, and Kalneh. So the Gemara says, what are these places? The Gemara says Bavel, of course, refers to Babylon, which is still around in the days of Chazal. Erech is Orichos, Akkad is Arcadia, which is called Baskar, and Kalneh is called in the days of Chazal Nofer Ninfi. Next, the Psukim say that from that land came Ashur. So Gemara says Ashur is called Silak. Now, what did he do? He built Ninveh, Rechovos Ir, and Kolach. What are these places? So Ninveh is still known to Chazal. It's still called Ninveh. It's the capital of Syria. Rechovos Ir is called Pras of Meshan. Kolach is called Pras of Borsif. The Psukim say further that there is Resen, which is between Ninveh and Kalach, and that is a great city. The Gemara says Resen is Aktesifon. Now, a great city, what's that referring to? I don't know if it's referring to Ninveh or Resen, the Gemara says, but the pasuk in Sefer Yonah, talking about Ninveh, calls it Ha'ir HaGedola, a great city. So you see that Ninveh is the one which is referred to as the great city. So that's what it was referring to then. Now the Gemara talks about the three giants who lived in Hebron. They are called Achimon, Sheshai, and Talmai, and they are called Yelidei Anak, children of the giants. The Gemara explains what their names were. The Gemara gives two sets of explanations as to what their names were and why they were called that. The Gemara says they were called Achimon. He was called Achimon because he was the most powerful of the brothers. That is, he was Achi Yemin. He was the right arm of the brothers. Sheshai is called that because he made the land under his feet to be she'es, to be destroyed with his heavy footsteps. And Talmai is because he made the earth into Talamim into furrows by his footsteps, dug deep trenches in the earth. The other explanation is that Achimon is called that because he built Anas, Sheshai built Alush, and Talmai built Talbush. And these are all, their names are based upon this. Now they're all called Yelidei Anak. The Gemara says anak means that they are manikin hachama. They make the sun into a necklace. They're so tall that the sun appears to be at the height of their necks, and their heads are towering even above it, and therefore looks like a necklace, a stone on a chain around their necks. Now the Gemara discusses who is going to destroy who in the future. So Yeshua ben Levi says that Rome is going to be destroyed by the Persians, because the pasuk says Shimon tzas Hashem asher yatz el Edom machshavos asher chashav al yoshvei Teman imlo yischavum tzir yatzon imlo yasim yashem alehem nevehem. Hashem discussed what he's going to do to Edom and his thoughts about the people of Teman, that the youngest of the flock, tzir yatzon, the youngest of the sheep, will drag them off and destroy their homes. So the Gemara says this is talking about Edom, which is Rome, and they're going to be destroyed by the youngest of the flock. So the Gemara says, who's the youngest of the flock? So, the Gemara says that Yeshua ben Levi says the name of Rebbe, that is apparently a reference to Persia. Persia is the youngest of the flock. So Gemara says, Rabbi Bar Ula asked, who told Rebbe that Persia refers to the youngest of the flock? Probably the reason is because Persia is compared to a sheep. Like it says, Ha'ayel Shara Isa Bal Karnaim Malchei Modai Ufaras. When Daniel is explaining the dream of Nebuchadnezzar, he says that the ram that you saw was when Daniel was explaining his own dream. He saw a ram, and he said that that's a reference to Persia. So you see that Persia is considered one of the flock. So Gemara says not necessarily, because the Yavan, Greece, is also referred to as a goat, like a pasuk says in similar context, V'hatzofir v'haseir melech Yavan, that the goats are the kings of Yavan. So Gemara says Rav Chaviva bar Surmaki went to Eretz Yisrael, and he said over this question to what Rabbi said in front of a certain rabbi. He doesn't say who. Gemara says that the rabbi said, how could somebody who doesn't know how to read psukim be asking kashas on Rebbe? When he said Tzir Yatzayin, it didn't mean because he's called a sheep. He said Tzir Yatzayin because he's the youngest of the brothers. He's the youngest of the sons of Yefes. He's Tiras, like we said earlier, and he's called the youngest of the flock. Okay, now the Gemara has another source that Rome will eventually fall into the hands of the Persians. The Gemara has the Rabbi Bar Rachana quotes of Yechon and says name Rabbi Yehuda Bar Ilai. Rome is going to fall to Persia as a Kal V'chomer. What's a Kal V'chomer? Because the first Beis HaMikdash was built by children of Shem, was built by Klal Yisrael, built by Shlomo HaMelech. Who destroyed the first Beis HaMikdash? The Kasdim. That's the Babylonians, the Chaldeans. Who did they fall to? Well, we know that the Babylonian Empire was taken over by the Persians. So the Persians were able to take over the Kasdim, who destroyed the Beis HaMikdash built by Shem. So then let's talk about the second Beis HaMikdash. The second Beis HaMikdash was destroyed by the Romans, and it was built by the Persians. So if the Persians could destroy the ones who, if the Persians could take over from the Kasdim, who destroyed the first Beis HaMikdash, they could certainly take over from the Romans, who destroyed their own Beis HaMikdash, not theirs, but the one that they allowed to be built and was built under their auspices, which is the second Beis HaMikdash. So the Gemara says that Rav disagrees with all this, and Rav says that Persia is actually going to fall to Rome in the end. And says Persia fall to Rome. How could that be? What would be the justice in having Persia fall to Rome? Rome already destroyed the Beis HaMikdash, which was allowed to be built under the Persians. Why should the Persians then fall to Rome? So Rav says, yeah, that's what HaKadosh Baruch Hu decided. That's what it's going to be. It doesn't have to make sense to you. Or I could tell you that the Persians are guilty, in fact, because they destroyed many shuls. The fact that they destroyed shuls, therefore they're going to end up being destroyed by Rome themselves. The Gemara says this is actually fits with what it says in a Brisa. The Brisa says that Persia is going to end up falling into the hands of Rome because they destroyed shuls, and because that is the Gzeira of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Now, Gemara quotes a related statement. Rav Yehuda says the name of Rav, that Mashiach ben David will not come until the evil Romans have overrun the entire world for a period of 9 months. As it says in the pasuk, Lachein yitneim ad es yoleida yalada veyeser echav yeshuvan al bnei Yisrael. He'll give up until the time that the one who gives birth has given birth, meaning 9 months, while the rest of Mashiach's brothers, will return with Klal Yisrael to Eretz Yisrael. The Gemara now returns to the topic of the Lishkas Parhedrin, the room in which the Kohen Gadol was isolated for the week before Yom Kippur, and the Gemara wants to know whether it had a mezuzah on it. So the Gemara says, yes, it had a mezuzah on it. However, it's machlokas tanaim whether that mezuzah was there midoraisa, whether it was obligated in a mezuzah midoraisa, or it was only there midorabanan. So the Gemara quotes a brisa. At the Tanakhamos, the Chachamim say that it was obligated in a mezuzah midoraisa. house of the Kohen Gadol for 1 week, and every home, every dwelling place is obligated midiraisa to have a mezuzah. Rabbi Yehuda disagrees. He says, no, that can't be the reason, because there are many rooms in the Beis HaMikdash which served as homes for people. There were the Leviim, Kohanim, who slept in certain rooms, and none of them had a mezuzah. So obviously the fact that it's a house for somebody does not make it obligated in a mezuzah if it is part of the Beis HaMikdash. The reason that it had a mezuzah, the reason that the Lishkas Parhedron had a mezuzah, was midirabanan, and the Gemara will say later that it's midirabanan. We didn't want it to appear like the Kohen Gadol was locked in a jail. We wanted it to look like a house, and therefore we put a mezuzah there, dirabanan. So now the Gemara wants to know, why does Rabbi Yehuda hold that it was chayiv in a mezuzah d'oraisa, and not why does Rabbi Yehuda hold that it was not chayiv in a mezuzah midaraisa, that it was chayiv only midarabanan? Why not midaraisa? So the Gemara offers 3 explanations, with each successive amora rejecting the explanation before him. So the first explanation is Rabbah. The Gemara says Rabbah holds that Rabbi Yehuda holds that any house which is not a all-season home is not chayiv in a mezuzah d'oraisa. If it's only a seasonal home, if it's only used during certain times of the year, it's not chayiv in a mezuzah d'oraisa. And the Lishkas Parhedron is only home to the Kohen Gadol for 7 days of the year. So Abaye doesn't like this. Abaye says it can't be. First of all, I'll prove that it's not correct, because there is a pasuk that says V'hikesi beis hachoref al beis hakayetz, and it talks about the winter house and the summer house. Obviously, they're both called a house, even though one's only for the winter, one's only for the summer. So Rab answered. He said, no. It's called a winter house and a summer house, but it's not called a stam house. It's not just called a regular house. In order to get the halacha and the title of being a house, it's got to be an all seasons house. That it's called a winter house, yes, but that being called a winter house doesn't make it chayiv in a mezuzah. So Abaye has another kasha, and he says that look at the sukkah. The sukkah is a machlokes between Rabbi Yehuda and the Chachamim, whether it's chayiv in a mezuzah or not. Rabbi Yehuda holds that a sukkah is chayiv in a mezuzah. In an eruv, you have to make an eruv chatzeres with it and any other area, because it counts as somebody's house. And also, it makes fruits brought in, they're obligated in meiser. The halacha is that produce are only obligated to have meiser taken from them once they're brought into a home. So Rabbi Yehuda holds that a sukkah counts as a home as far as these 3 halachos, eruv, mezuzah, and meiser. The Chachamim disagree, say it doesn't count as a home for eruv, mezuzah, and meiser. So you see that Rabbi Yehuda does hold that a sukkah is chayiv in a mezuzah. If he holds that a sukkah is chayiv in a mezuzah, a sukkah is definitely only a seasonal house, so obviously it's chayiv in a mezuzah. Now maybe you'll tell me it's only chayiv midrabanan. Well, that can't be, because you would assume that all 3 halachos are all on the same level, eruv, mezuzah, and meiser. It cannot be that Rabbi Yehuda would say that a sukkah only counts as a house midrabanan as far as hilchos meiser. That would mean that you have a house that is only makes your fruits chayiv in meiser midrabanan, as opposed to your main house, which makes it chayiv in meiser midaraisa. That means that the fruit which you bring into your main house is chayiv in meiser daraisa. The fruit which you bring into your sukkah is chayiv in meiser midrabanan. What's going to happen if you take meiser or truma or anything else from one of these fruits on the other fruits? On a darabanan chayiv fruit, on a daraisa chayiv fruit, it's not going to work. And you'll get confused, and you'll start having fruit which is you took off meiser midarabanan, not midaraisa. You'll end up taking from something which is chayiv and something which is not chayiv, or vice versa, and you'll get messed up, and it'll be a very confusing situation. Therefore, it cannot be that Rabbi Yehuda holds that a sukkah is chayiv and meiser or dirabanan. When he says it's chayiv and meiser, when he says that it is mechayiv fruits and meiser, it has to mean daraisa, and therefore it also has to count as a house as far as halachas of mezuzah midaraisa. So Abaye therefore rejects Rabbi's explanation. He says a different explanation, and he says that the mechalkes between Rabbi Yehuda and the Chachamim as to whether or not the Lishkas Parhedron had a mezuzah was not during the 7 days that the Kohen was there. While the Kohen is there, it was definitely chayiv and mezuzah daraisa. The machlokes is the rest of the year. According to the Chachamim, we make it have a mezuzah the rest of the year, gzeira midirabanan, that if we don't have a mezuzah the rest of the year, we may forget to put it up when the Kohen will actually live there. And Yehuda says, no, there is no such gzeira midirabanan. We only put a mezuzah on it in order that it shouldn't look like a jail. It was not chayiv in mezuzah midirabanan. There was no gzeira that it's chayiv midirabanan. It's only that it shouldn't look like a jail at all. Now it comes out, according to Abaye, Rabbi Yehuda and the Chachamim actually agree that it had a mezuzah, and they agree that it was chayiv in mezuzah for the 7 days midaraisa, and the rest of the time it had a mezuzah midrabanan. The only difference is what the reason is. According to the Chachamim, the reason is that you shouldn't end up in a situation where you forget to put the mezuzah on when the Kohen Gadol is there. And according to Rabbi Yehuda, so that it shouldn't look like a jail the rest of the year. So now the Gemara says that Rava has a kasha on Abaye, because the kasha is as follows: that according to both opinions, then everybody agrees that a seasonal house is chayiv in a mezuzah. Meaning, we said that while the Kohen Gadol is in the Lishkas Parhedron, it's chayiv in a mezuzah. So how did either of these fit with the opinion of the Chachamim? The Chachamim said that a sukkah does not have to have a mezuzah. Why should a sukkah not have to have a mezuzah according to that? So therefore, Rava says a slightly different pshat. Rava says, I agree with you that the machlokes is about the rest of the year, but the reasoning for the machlokes about Lishkas Parhedron is very different than the machlokes about a sukkah itself. And that is as follows. As far as the Lishkas Parhedron, the machlokes between Rabbi Yehuda and the Chachamim is over whether a place which you're forced to live in is chayiv in a mezuzah or not. Rabbi Yehuda says that a place you're forced to live is not called a house, and therefore you're not chayiv in it in a mezuzah midaraisa. The Rabbanan put a mezuzah on there in order that it shouldn't look like a jail. According to the Chachamim, however, even if you're forced to live there, you have to live there. The Kohen Gadol didn't have a choice. It's still chayiv in a mezuzah midaraisa, and therefore it was chayiv in a mezuzah all year round. Now, that has nothing to do with the machlokes about a sukkah. That doesn't apply to a sukkah. A sukkah is not a place where you're forced to live. The reason that there's a machlokes about a sukkah is because the machlokes is whether a sukkah is supposed to be a permanent residence or a temporary residence. According to Chachamim, it's supposed to be a temporary residence, and therefore it doesn't have a mezuzah. Temporary residences don't get a mezuzah. According to Rabbi Yehuda, it's supposed to be a permanent residence, and therefore it is chayiv in a.
Drive the Daf is a project of the Grand Woodlands Shul and is presented by Rabbi Yitzchak Landa. Find us on YouTube or subscribe to daily emails by emailing drivethedaf@gmail.com.